Welcome back, Skallywag's. Marine Tech Mike. Tech tip time. It's been a little while. Sorry about that. I'm out here on One Ocean, the boat that's circumnavigating North and South America, headed to the Northwest Passage. And so, Tech tip 41 is about testing the high temperature alarm in your engine. We almost had a very serious problem on day one of 14 months, 27,000 miles. And that's because we had a screw come loose and lost all the coolant in our engine. And the high temperature alarm buzzer wasn't working. So we feel it's important, and shame on us when we redid the engine and a bunch of work in the complete refit. We ran out of time, but we didn't test the actual alarm. And so what happened was we were motoring along the first day, and we'd been keeping an eye on the temperature gauge, and all of a sudden we looked and it was, creeping way up. And so we shut the engine down, went in the engine room, and sure enough, all the coolant had dumped out, just as a loose drain plug, and filled it back up, no worries. But as a boat owner and as a technician, when you do major engine work, most people don't test the high coolant temperature alarm. And so what you can do is, obviously, when you turn on your engine and you get the buzzer and the light, that's your low oil pressure alarm. So that's got to self-test every time you start the engine. But what we don't have is a way to test the high coolant temperature. So if you remember and look back at Tech Tip 4 about testing gauges, when you go in and look at the engine, get your service manual out, right near the thermostat housing, you're going to have one or two. You could have a temperature switch. We're looking for the switch, which is going to trigger the alarm. The engine also has a gauge. So if you have both an alarm system and a gauge, you're going to have to figure out which is which. And so you take your handy dandy jumper wire and head down into the engine room. You're going to need a friend probably to save time. And what you do is you just take and ground them out. Now normally, often a switch will have two connections, where a gauge is going to rely on the engine block as the return path. But went down into the engine room and hit the first one, and sure enough, it was the gauge. So that was the one on the starboard side of this Yanmar. We're working on a 4LH today. And the gauge peg. So we knew which one was the temperature gauge. We knew it was working. So we went to the other sensor and we shorted it out. And sure enough, we got a light that came on, which we had seen, but we didn't have any buzzer. And so at that time, let's take a look at this little clip. We tore this apart and started investigating and found out what was wrong. Mystery solved here. We're troubleshooting and looking at alarms. You should always test your alarms. Don't know what exactly happened, but I got in behind the scenes here after we lost our coolant, right? And down in here, what I found was some wires that weren't connected. And I do remember that when we pulled the engine out and had the cockpit off, there was a whole bunch of wires that went to the pedestal. That really went nowhere. They went to the pedestal area. And at some point in time, this boat's had 5 different owners. May have been some finger trouble. Somebody, it looked like, had put all the alarms and start-stop switches piggybacked with big heavy wire all the way to the cockpit. Those are long since abandoned when we got the boat. And then in here, we had trouble with the oil pressure gauge and the key start switch. Somebody had gotten rid of the start relay on the engine inadvertently. We replaced that and got rid of the intermittent key switch. We had to put a new wire on the oil pressure gauge. What we had found was, in here, there's a couple wires that weren't hooked to anything, and I don't know if they got pulled out when we had this panel in and out a dozen times, but I don't think so. The piezo buzzer was hooked to the old wiring and not to the actual gauge panel itself. So, don't know, but we got it hooked up. So now, we got this piezo buzzer attached to the little Yanmar wiring harness and not the abandoned pedestal. And check this out. I've got the jumper wire shorted on the switch. And so we've got buzzer and in here working light. that's a win. Now, when we're motoring for hours and we're not paying attention and we're making scrambled eggs or something, if we were to have this situation again, we're going to get an alert. How about that? Previous problems. So we got the new piezo buzzer installed, and now when we turn on the key and short out the switch, we get not only the light, but we also get the buzzer. And so we're in good shape to keep going. So tech tip 41, test that high temperature, high coolant over temperature switch and make sure that it's working and you're getting both audible and visual alarms on your boat. Keep it safe. Keep everybody happy. Thanks for watching.